Okay, I recorded a little podcast episode. I'm going to post it down below. Look at the sun. And I just wanted to talk about narratives once again. And we do live in an age of narratives, and people always wanted to tell stories to make sense of the world. It's very normal for us to want to tell stories about what's happening around us. But we need to realize the limits of storytelling and narration, because when we tell stories, we more often than not are going to use the ideological frameworks that are available to us, whether we want to or not, whether we have good intentions or not. We're going to necessarily use some of the ideological tools that are accessible to us just because there's nothing else. Even if we try to be original, even if we try to be not like everybody else, we're still going to use at least some ideological frameworks. And that is not to say that storytelling is useless and bad. No, storytelling can really help us understand the ideology. It can help us analyze what kind of power dynamics are currently at play, what kind of power dynamics we may be engaged in personally. But we've got to remember that every single story that we tell ourselves about the world and that people tell us about the world, they're stories, so they should be taken with a grain of salt. And when people start talking about narratives, they immediately start thinking about postmodernism. And I think that is one of the biggest wins that the CIA and the other people who were working on anti-communist propaganda, they really won that battle when they were able to, thanks to the funding they provided and the general skepticism towards the Soviet Union and the other actually existing socialist projects, when they were able to use all of this to guide certain Marxist philosophers in the West away from the actual practice of socialism and communism, that was their biggest win. I don't know if the sentence made sense at all. It's all rumbled up, and the sun, this holy lighting, is really distracting me, okay? But you'll have to tell me whether you understood what I was trying to say. Nonetheless, the scientists and the researchers and the philosophers such as Baudrillard and Foucault and all of those fancy French guys, we can still gain a lot from using some of their tools and some of their frameworks. If we solely rely on them, we are going to probably make mistakes. We're probably going to fail in our attempts at understanding the world, because ultimately they don't think the truth exists, right? They think that the objective reality is non-existent, as far as I could gather from all the little tidbits I've been exposed to over the years. But the Marxist framework, on the other hand, provides you with the tools to make sense of the objective reality, because it exists, it is there, and it is cognizable, something that I've talked about at length on many occasions. The world outside of you does exist, and you can get to know it, but it changes all the time. The dialectical materialism postulates, dialectical monism postulates that we're all one substance, right? We all come from the same substance as everything else. Yes, there are multiple configurations of the substance. This is why there's so much diversity, but ultimately it is cognizable, meaning that we can get to know it, but it's going to change, and it changes all the time. It changes constantly, whether we notice or not. Everything changes all the time. And we as communists, or as just people who want to get to know the world better, we are bound to continue learning. So with narratology, or whatever this is called, when you base your learning on narratives, you are ultimately going to learn abstractly. And I talked about concrete learning in the past, when concrete learning is not just getting to know as much as you can about the topic at hand. It's also the angles, the different perspectives, and all of the aspects, all of the feelings, all of the projections, all of the trauma, all of the things that may be encompassed in a certain phenomena. All of this has to be taken into account when analyzing and making sense of anything. And this is a lot of work. This is a lot of work. That means that for every single subject matter you decide to study, you commit to basically a lifelong journey of continuously discovering new things, and it's a never-ending process. So I understand how frustrating it is, and I personally am frustrated at times when I learn about certain topics, and then there's something new that arises, and then I'm like, well, can we get a break? Can we stop? And the answer is no, we cannot. And of course, we can take personal breaks. We don't have to continuously learn about certain subject matter, and we've got to employ as many people as we can in learning about anything. But we've got to just remind ourselves that the narratives that the capitalist status quo provides for us, and the narratives that we invent or come up with on our own, they're all very temporary, and more is going to come, more information is going to arise that's going to change what we think and how we think. This is how the material shapes the ideal, how we think about the world, what we believe about the world. This is all the ideal. And the material is going to necessarily dictate the changes and the way we look at it, etc., etc. So, and the podcast episode that I recorded gives you a little example of how everyone's going to fall for narratives from time to time, and how hard it is to actually dig through the propaganda to try and gain those kernels of truth. This is what Hegel actually also asserted, that every lie has in itself a kernel of truth. That does not mean this lie is a truth. That just means that in order to become, a lie has to be based on something, right? And the something, if you go down a long chain, you are going to discover the kernel of truth. At least this is my loose interpretation of how Hegel saw the kernels of the truth in lies. But I do find kernels of the truth everywhere, and I see how the truth is being twisted for certain agendas, right? And there are some questions that can help you make sense of some of these narratives and understand why they exist and how you can possibly integrate them into your own learning. It is asking questions about who it benefits. This is the number one question that I think is the most helpful in the modern day and age, in the capitalist day and age. Who does it benefit? Because if it benefits the status quo, if it benefits the powers that be, then everything's very clear. Like, it's going to prop up some kind of capitalist myth so that the machine keeps on grinding, and that's the end of the story. That does not mean, however, that out of all this debris, you won't be able to find a kernel of truth and something to sit with and something to reflect upon and something to possibly talk about to other people. But again, the question, who does this benefit, is one of the most helpful, at least in the modern day and age. Now, other questions, the why, the how questions, are immensely helpful. Why has this been created? Why does this exist? What kind of purposes does it pursue? What kind of needs can it possibly fulfill? Again, why? And then how? How was it made? What is the process of its becoming? Etc., etc. And then the how questions are actually the looking for contradictions types of questions, because when you start looking into how something is created, how something comes to be, this is when you're able to see the thesis arise, and then possibly you will be able to either predict an antithesis or see the antithesis in the current existing material circumstances. So the asking questions is absolutely essential if you look at the narratives, and we always look at the narratives. News articles, even research papers very, very often are just narratives. They tell us a story about something that actually happens in the material reality. They give us the reflection, the perception, and ultimately the projection of these other people who engage with this material reality. And our job as communists or people who are trying to make sense of the world is to not judge it as wrong and bad, but seek those kernels of truth and look at the possible connections that lie within all of these narrative spins, because again, most of these narrative spins, they're going to provide for us some necessary information. So the sun is becoming really, really blinding. Hopefully I was able to relate to you some information that is somewhat useful. Check out the podcast. Let me know what you think. I hope you have a great day today. Consider supporting me on Patreon. Do take care of yourself and your community first. Subscribe to me on all the other social medias. I'm beginning to do something there, and I'll talk to you sometime later.